Opening the season at home with convincing wins over Denver and Boston, the Raiders immediately found themselves in a critical must-win situation. The undefeated Kansas City Chiefs, defending league champions, came to the Coliseum. The early season showdown brought a crowd of more than 50,000. Oakland's defense made it an important play early in the game. Safety Roger Byrd intercepted Glenn Dawson's pass. Quickly, Darryl LaMonica passed to Clem Daniels, the halfback, for a score. The Raiders held just a 3-point lead as the second half began. And they saw it threatened when linebacker Bobby Bell intercepted deep in Oakland territory. But as it did so often in 1967, the defense turned the momentum. Ike Lassiter and Dan Connors teamed up on a big play. Lassiter made the hit. Connors grabbed the ball and thundered 49 yards to the Chiefs' 27. Oakland had to settle for a field goal, but the momentum, which had been Kansas City's, now belonged to the Raiders. The Chiefs, though, were far from finished as Mike Garrett hit Otis Taylor for a score. It remained for LaMonica to bring the Oakland offense back with the clincher late in the game. Daniels' fine run set it up. On an unusual tight end screen, fine blocks by Wayne Hawkins and Fred Biletnikoff enabled Billy Cannon, 1959 Heisman Trophy winner from LSU, to score. It was Oakland's day, narrowly 23-21. A vital part of the Raider win was the excellent work of the special teams, controlling lightning-fast Nolan Smith, the Chiefs' punt and kickoff return specialist. Tough rookies, Dwayne Benson of Hamlin, Bob Cruz of Wayne State, Bill Fairbairn of Colorado, and veterans Ken Herrock of West Virginia, Phil Budness of Boston University, Jim Harvey of Mississippi, and Carlton Oates of Florida A&M were among top special teams performers. After their only loss of the season, a 27-14 thumping administered in New York by Joe Namath and the Jets, the Raiders moved on to Buffalo for the second leg of the difficult Eastern Tour. In retrospect, the game was perhaps the most pivotal of the season. Another loss would have dropped Oakland 2 full games behind unbeaten San Diego. On the other hand, a victory would put the club's record at 4-1 and keep pressure on the Chargers. A record crowd was in War Memorial Stadium to see former Buffalo quarterback Darryl LaMonica duel veteran Bills signal caller Jack Kemp. Instead, they saw a battle between two outstanding defensive units. Now nicknamed the 11 Angry Men by a New York journalist, the Oakland defense put on an awesome display. The front four, with the assistance of linebackers Gus Otto of Missouri, Bill Lasky of Michigan, and Dan Connors of Miami, made Kemp's afternoon a long one. This punt return by Roger Byrd and a subsequent pass to Fred Biletnikoff enabled the Raiders to lead 10-7. With less than 2 minutes to play in the half, Kemp ran into trouble near his own goal line, and Dan Connors turned it into a TD and a 10-point lead. In the third period, the Bills narrowed the gap on a play strikingly similar to the Connors interception. 290-pound Jim Dunaway rumbled to the Oakland 3-yard line. And it was Keith Lincoln who scored. With the Bills pressing to take control of the game and trailing by just 3 points, safety Howie Williams made his most important interception of the season. Under LaMonica's direction, the Raiders turned it into a score. Kemp later hit ex-Raider Art Powell for a touchdown, but too late, and Oakland tucked away a very large victory. A week later in Boston, dependable Roger Hagberg came off the bench, scored a pair of touchdowns, and sparked the Raiders to a 48-14 victory that completed a successful Eastern trip. Raider offensive guard Wayne Hawkins, an off-season member of the staff of the Oakland Bank of Commerce, is seen here with Bank President Carol Weaver, who has led not only the destinies of the Oakland Bank of Commerce as they have helped build the East Bay and Bay Area, but many important business firms in the area. The Oakland Bank of Commerce is a full-service bank in every respect, and as pro football has its specialists, Coach Weaver insists that members of the bank staff know something about the business of its customers. Thus, bank officers and staff members know not only the people they do business with, but something about that business. You are watching as various bank officers consult with officials of some of the business establishments they have helped build and continue to build. Whether it's a loan to expand or financing in a foreign country, or helping to guide the Oakland Raiders Boosters Club, the Oakland Bank of Commerce and its staff are there continuing to help build not only the East Bay, but the Bay Area as well. The Oakland Bank of Commerce. The Raiders returned home winners in 5 of their first 6 games, trailing division-leading San Diego, who were still unbeaten but once tied. The battle for first place between the two bitter California rivals was sold out several days before kickoff. A record crowd of 53,474 turned out in balmy 70-degree weather. After the Raiders had scored first on a safety by Dan Birdwell, LaMonica and Clem Daniels hooked up on a picture pass play for a Raider touchdown. Then for the 3rd time in as many games, safety Roger Bird and his teammates on the Raider punt return unit made an important contribution. The Corbin Comet, a first-round draft choice in 1966, blasted up the middle for 78 yards. LaMonica later scored, and Oakland led 16-3, but the Chargers proved their explosiveness on the very first play after the kickoff as the legendary Lance Allworth took a perfectly thrown pass from John Hadel. The Oakland effort that day featured, among other things, 3 pass interceptions by cornerback Dave Grayson, the veteran from Oregon, who had replaced Willie Brown, injured in the second quarter. Throughout 1967, when John Rauch went to the Oakland bench, he picked winners. Time after time, replacements for injured starters came up with important and, in some cases, game-winning plays. The Raider offense also stood out on a day that was all Oakland's. Fred Biletnikoff made a great catch. And Clem Daniels ripped off his longest run of the season. George Blanda had a pass intercepted. But that situation was put right, and in a hurry, by Warren Wells. The final was Oakland 51, San Diego 10. The Raiders were the new Western Division leaders with 6 victories and only 1 defeat. The Silver and Black extended its win string to 5 and moved the season mark to 8-1 with tough victories over Denver and Miami. Despite their glittering record, the Raiders couldn't put daylight between themselves and San Diego. The Chargers remain just a half game back of Oakland, with the Raiders scheduled to face the powerful Kansas City Chiefs Thanksgiving Day in Kansas City. Opening in place of All-League halfback Clem Daniels, who was injured 4 days earlier against the Miami Dolphins, second-year pro Pete Banaszak of Miami University proved equal to the challenge, as did Larry Todd, who backed up Banaszak later in the year. Fred Biletnikoff had a big day, as did most of Oakland's offense. The defensive secondary of ex-Nebraska sprint star Kent McClure and Grambling's Willie Brown at corners, and Roger Berg, Warren Powers, Howie Williams, and Dave Grayson sharing duties at safety, made a sizable contribution to the defensive effort that day. Brown and Powers each had touchdown interceptions. And the rest of the Oakland defense added to its string of outstanding performances. The Chiefs managed some spectacular offense, but not enough as Oakland kept winning, this time 44-22. The Raiders had won 9 of 10, but San Diego dogged their heels with a come-from-behind win over Denver. The Turkey Day wins by the Raiders and Chargers set the stage for one of the most important games of the '67 season. A record crowd packed San Diego's plush new stadium to watch the AFL's hottest rivalry, Oakland versus San Diego, in a moment of truth battle. As at Oakland, stakes were first place in the West. The Raiders scored first after a 75-yard march that featured good blocking in the offensive line by tackles Bob Swias of USC and Harry Shue of Memphis State. Fred Biletnikoff caught the touchdown pass. The score was tied when on third and short yardage, Oakland fooled the Charger defense. LaMonica to Cannon. Down by 10, the dangerous Chargers came tearing back. Hadel to the great Lance Allworth. The remainder of the half was a whirlwind of action. Oakland raced to a 31-14 lead after a Willie Brown interception and a pass to Hewlett Dixon. Both of these plays preceded Raider touchdowns. The Chargers, though, weren't quitting, and a wild first half ended with the Raiders in doubtful command, 31-21. Perhaps dismayed that they had allowed the Chargers 21 first-half points, the Oakland defense stiffened and shut out San Diego the rest of the afternoon. In the meantime, the offense put the capper on another important victory. More than 5,000 Raider fans made the journey south to watch Oakland win 41-21. Their trip was a happy one. Visions of a title hovered over the East Bay. Oakland was 10-1 and led San Diego by a game and a half with just 3 to play. The Raiders finished their road campaign the following week against a rising young Houston Oilers team, which was in the process of completing one of the most remarkable turnabouts in AFL history. Last in their division in 1966, Houston was about to overtake New York at the top of the Eastern standings. In the thick of their own title fight, badly wanting to knock off the rocketing Raiders, the Oilers reached an emotional peak on a chilly, dreary day in Rice Stadium. Near the close of the first half, Pete Beathard connected with fullback Hoyle Granger for the score. Oakland trailed at half 7-0. After Willie Brown stopped another Houston threat with an interception, the Raiders' offense went to work and cranked up a seemingly interminable 17-play drive that ended in their first score of the day. A short field goal by George Blanton. Houston's lead was 7-3, and from Miami came news that San Diego trailed the Dolphins. Another Raider drive, and another Blanda field goal. Oakland inched closer, 7-6. Miami still led the Chargers. Literally smelling the money, the 11 angry men became nearly impregnable. In the raw night air, the game turned into a grim battle, reducing itself to basic football, strength against strength. Blanda once again found the range, and the Raiders finally led, 9-7. Miami had increased its lead over San Diego. Houston had the ball but 3 plays before Dan Connor stole a pass. The offense, and Hewitt Dixon took over. Touchdown, Oakland. Miami was now comfortably ahead of the Chargers, and the dedicated Silver and Black Raiders were moments away from a Western Division championship. George Blanda closed the door on his old teammates with another field goal, his 4th of the day. The Raiders won 19-7, and the win streak stretched to 8 in a row. Minutes after the game, the San Diego defeat was announced, and the Raiders were officially champions of the West. Their own division race finished. The Raiders closed out the season at home against the New York Jets and Buffalo Bills. They won both games to run their season's record to an amazing 13-1, best in league history. In the Jets game, the Raider defense had its hands full with New York's brilliant quarterback, Joe Namath. Earlier in the year, Namath had been instrumental in beating the Raiders. The game featured some great Raider defense. That included a crucial goal line stand. That also included these 2 important second-half plays by linebacker John Robert Williamson, both of which led to touchdowns. The Raider offense was aided by fine blocking. This is won by Warren Wells on a long gainer to Fred Biletnikoff. Now good blocking efforts in the offensive line by top draftee Gene Upshaw and all-league guard Wayne Hawkins on a tough run by Pete Banaszak. The Raiders' victory margin was 39-28. 1 week later, John Raucher's men decisioned the Buffalo Bills 28-21. On New Year's Eve 1967, pro football's young and dynamic organization, the Silver and Black Oakland Raiders, played the Houston Oilers for the championship of the 8-year-old American Football League. Pre-game speculation centered around the question of Oakland's ability to score on a defense that had allowed the fewest points of any team in pro football. On the other hand, could the 11 angry men check the freight train rushes of fullback Hoyle Granger and Woody Campbell? Houston kicked off to the Raiders, and those questions began to be answered. A first-period Oiler drive was stopped when Dan Connor stole a pass right out of the arms of Alvin Reed. The Oilers could gain little ground against the characteristically stubborn Oakland defense. 2 important second-quarter plays turned a close game into a comfortable Raider lead. Oakland's great 8-time All-League center Jim Otto made an important block on Hewitt Dixon's 69-yard touchdown gallop. The Raiders got another drive going, but with seconds remaining in the half, seemed forced to settle for an attempt at 3 points. The field goal alignment, though, was a fraud. LaMonica instead passed to Dave Kusurik for a touchdown and a halftime lead of 17-0. Mike Eichheid continued to punt as he had throughout the season, with distance and accuracy. Oakland dominated the second half as they had the first, and the afternoon belonged to the Raiders and their fans. The final was 40-7. Losers of 19 straight games in 1961 and 62, the once pitiful Raiders had become the unquestioned champions of the American Football League. The 53,330 who sat so comfortably that afternoon in the Coliseum to watch a tough, single-minded, carefully constructed football apparatus dismantle the Houston Oilers was a far cry from the handful who short years before had watched the Raiders play in temporary homes. Those loyal fans who had supported the club from the beginning deserved a championship, perhaps more than any other fans in the history of sports. Then it was on to Miami as the AFL champion Oakland Raiders flew east on their chartered United Airlines DC-8. The Raiders, like 9 of the 10 AFL teams, fly the friendly skies of United. In the second AFL-NFL World Championship game, the Raiders met the monarchs of professional football, the Green Bay Packers. Each team's offense scored 2 touchdowns, but the differences were 4 Packer field goals and costly Oakland mistakes. The Raiders had their moments, including 2 scoring passes to split end Bill Miller, but not enough of them. And Green Bay, as it had done so consistently in its own league, won decisively 33-14. Despite the loss to Green Bay, 1967 will be remembered as a great season. John Roush was named the AFL's Coach of the Year. He was assisted by this outstanding staff. Defensive line coach Tom Doms, an All-American at San Diego State. Linebacker coach John Madden, an all-conference tackle at Cal Poly. Coach of the defensive secondary, Charlie Sumner, a brilliant offensive back at William & Mary. Ollie Spencer, a former Kansas University great, coaches the Raider offensive line, and John Polanchek, who starred at Michigan State, is the offensive backfield coach. George Anderson is among the top trainers in sports, and Dick Romansky, once a little All-America quarterback, is the team's equipment manager. Team doctor Ken Small, who has been with the Raiders since 1960, completes the club's on-the-field staff. With the winning of their first AFL championship, the Raiders reached a plateau. In 1963, Al Davis, now managing owner, came to Oakland dedicated to the development of the Raiders as the finest organization in professional sports. Excellent progress has been made. Now, in 1968, the Silver and Black again prepare to assume their role as the standard bearer of this great East Bay community. The rivalries of the American Football League have become fierce and violent. They have turned friendships into hostilities. 1968 will be the most difficult in the club's 9-year history. The Chargers, the Jets, the Chiefs, the Oilers, and the rest of the AFL teams will be taking their best shot at the champions, the Raiders of Oakland. It is more difficult to defend a title than to win it. Al Davis has said the challenge ahead is a tremendous one. But no matter how great that challenge, the Oakland Raiders intend to meet it, as usual, with pride and poise.
NFL football was brought to you by Gillette, makers of the Track 2 shaving system and the Dry Look hair groom for men. Gillette, first in its league, first with men for almost 75 years.